And I can continue to see people coming in. I know it was a late night. You'll make it. Lots of seats over here. Perfect. So without further ado, I am going to bring up Adam Gazzaley, but before I do, Adam, I'm just going to take a quick moment to share with you what we've got in store for you today. So today we are going to have Adam kick it off, and then we're going to bring up a group of entrepreneurs who are going to tell us all about the next technologies to accelerate learning. This will be both in the educational environment as well as across the enterprise. Then we've got a very special treat for you. We're going to have several researchers come up on stage and talk to you about the research that they're doing to understand and promote creativity and productivity from a scientific perspective. So they're going to take a couple of scientific deep dives. And then we're going to end out the morning in a conversation with Jazz Venture Partners partner John Spinelli, who will be having a conversation with Shankar Chandran of Samsung, discussing their virtual reality strategy and where they believe that's going and how it will impact multiple markets going forward. We'll then break for lunch again, come back here at 1:30 and go through a series of fantastic sessions, everything from experiential entertainment to emotional analytics, through to experiential technology to improve physical performance. This is going to be an amazing panel. We've got folks from the Philadelphia Eagles, some ex-Navy SEALs who actually ran their entire technology team. So they will be able to provide a lot of insight into how these technologies actually do work, do get adopted, or fail in reality. So on that note, I'm going to bring up Adam, and Adam is going to share with us, everything that has to do with his research. He is a professor of neurology, psychiatry at UCSF. He's the director of the neuroimaging lab. Many people think he's a professional speaker, but indeed, he does run a lab of 100 neuroscientists at UCSF who are completely focused on neuroplasticity research. In addition to that, he runs the Neuroscape lab there and is our chief scientist at Jazz Venture Partners. And on that note, Adam, take it away.
Thank you. Thanks, Zach. Yep. Good morning, everyone. Can we pop some slides up? How's everyone doing? I love all the most vibrant souls that come out for the morning talk on the second day, so I appreciate you being here. So for those of you that have heard me speak before, whether at XTech or another venue, I'm pretty full throttle, optimistic and excited about technology and all the promise for helping make us better people in every way. But you're going to get a little bit of a different talk now, a little bit more of a grounded, cautious view about technology. And if you were here yesterday for my chat with John Favreau, this really pivots off of a lot of the things that we were discussing, things that I've been thinking about a lot lately, and is the topic of this new book that I just published with Larry Rosen called The Distracted Mind, Ancient Brains in a High-Tech World. So I think that this is a good topic, especially for the people here, people that are visionary and looking for an exciting future of technology as a positive impact, but we have to place it in the context of the challenges that technology can bring upon us. So before we start bashing the brain, let's start, with giving it the proper respect, right? The brain is the most extraordinary structure that we know in the universe. This is unquestionable, right? It's capable of incredibly rapid processing, allowing us to interpret complex information in the environment within tenths of a second. It stores over 100 billion bits of information, 50,000 times the information in the Library of Congress. It's capable of allowing us to have associations between events that occurred decades apart, making us wonder, how does our brains deal with this, right? And I don't have to explain to this audience that the last several decades have seen an explosion in information technology. The diversity of the devices and the software that brings information into our lives, really ushering us in to the information age. And it makes so much sense because at our core, we're really information-seeking creatures. And I'm going to come back to this sort of evolutionary perspective on information. But we don't just see it in the amount of technology that we have in our lives, but in the way we use technology. right? So we know that we just voraciously consume technology. And 95% of people report using more than one device simultaneously, what we call multitasking, right? This could be a third of your day in this type of behavior. And if you're a young person, the reports are up to 7 devices at a single time, several streams of information, 7 coming in. And it's not just that, right? It's not just how we use technology, it's where we use it and when we use it. So it has invaded every aspect of our lives, right? It's in our bedrooms, our bathrooms, our classrooms, our restaurants. It goes on vacation with us. But even more salient than that is the shift that it has created in the expectations that we have. Now, 24/7 productivity and responsivity is just expected of us. And this has dramatically changed how we interact with each other, our environment, and even with ourselves. And sometimes it's trivial and even funny. There's a million hilarious examples if you search multitasking on Google. But sometimes, as we know, it's life-threatening. And so it really begs the question, what's going on here? How did all this occur? And from my perspective, what's going on in here, right? That's what I want to talk to you a little bit about. For that, we turn to neuroscience, where other scientists, and including my lab, has been exploring these abilities known as cognitive control. These are the set of skills that enable us to interact with this complex world around us based on our goals, with or without technology. And I look at this as a triad of abilities. The first is attention. Attention is our ability to take our limited cognitive resources and put it where we want it in space and time. That is also complemented by what we call working memory. Working memory is not long-term memory. It's not remembering things, all the way out into the distant back into the distant past. It's just that online memory that gets you from one event to the other when it's interrupted. And interruptions occur all the time because of what we call goal management, the fact that we multitask and task switch all the time. These are the fundamental cognitive skills that allow us or any creature to interact in the world around us. The problem is, or the challenge, is that there are fundamental limitations in all these abilities. Limitations that actually don't differ very much from other animals, thus the ancient brains. So our attention, although we can focus it, and there are limitations on how much we can focus it in the first place, but what we can't do is just cast it out like a net into the ocean. We can't distribute it broadly. We have to make choices about what information we take in. Working memory has limitations both in the fidelity and in the capacity, right? So there's a degradation of the resolution of information when it's not immediately in your perceptual world, when you hold it in mind. And goal management, multitasking. Yesterday you heard about the myth of multitasking. And it doesn't mean that we don't multitask. Multitasking as a behavior is something that we do all the time. But if you look mechanistically in the brain, we don't multitask when you are doing things that demand attention. If there's more than one attention-demanding task, what you do is switch between them. And what happens is with each switch of these neural networks, there's a loss of performance. There's a degradation of the information and a cost that you pay in terms of your performance. So we have these basic limitations, and then along come our high-level goals. In my view, our goal-setting ability is the pinnacle of the human brain. It is the highest level of evolution that we achieved. This amazing capacity to set goals, long-term goals. You could set goals decades out in the future. We have goals that are interwoven with other goals that are interwoven with other people and their goals. Other animals do not do this. This is not how they interact with the world, even other primates. So what's going on here is that we have these high-level goals that have evolved in our brain, and then we have these fundamental limitations, and they collide. This is the conflict that we all recognize in our lives, and this creates what we call, in our field, interference. It is the conflict, the interference between what you want to do and what you're actually capable of doing. And this is where technology has aggravated how we interact with the world, or caused a challenge, is because it has put pressure on this conflict. Technology hasn't created the challenge. This challenge has always existed between our goals and what we're capable of doing, but it has certainly aggravated it. And this is why I say we are ancient brains living in a high-tech world. Now, interference is complicated. There's many, many different forms of it, and I just want to take us through it very rapidly. there's the obvious ones, the external interference, the ones that you read about all the time that some of you are engaging in right now. And that external interference is other sources of information in the world around you that we define in two different ways. They could be distractions. Distractions are completely irrelevant information. It's things that you are actually trying to ignore because you're trying to focus on one thing, but it still gets in because you don't have a perfect filter, and it causes interference. So the classic example is you're at a restaurant, you're engaging in a conversation, and you're just trying to hold back that chatter, but it gets in anyway. The other type of external interference is when you make the decision to engage in more than one stream of information, what we call multitasking, which is often task switching. This is even a more disruptive form of interference, and there is no doubt that technology, just because of the incredible accessibility to information, has put a lot of pressure here. But another really, even perhaps more interesting aspect of this is that internal interference can exist with both distractions, completely irrelevant information where you don't want your mind to wander, or interruptions when you choose to do something and actually have an internal dialogue and do something else. Technology seems to have aggravated internal distraction through anxiety and other pressures that cause us to constantly return to all this information that we're exposed to. So that's the more subtle aspect of this here, is that technology doesn't just create external interference, it creates internal interference as well. This interference and its impact is broad across every aspect of cognition, and this is what the work that I've done with my lab for over a decade in showing how interference can degrade our perception, decision-making, long-term memory, very short working memory, and even emotional regulation. So we're very sensitive to this interference. Even if you're not aware of it, it degrades all of these aspects. And then it cascades into interference and impact in our real-world behavior. Safety, I already gave the most obvious one of texting and driving, but even using a mobile phone in driving has a 4 times increase in your chance of getting in an accident, and it's even been compared to, with data, to being drunk and driving. And this is not mitigated by being hands-free. Even if your eyes are on the road, if your brain is not on the road, if you have that interference, you will have a decrease in performance and an increased safety risk. Sleep, more and more information showing not just the loss of sleep of using your tech all night, but even the light spectrums that come through, especially in young people. Research has shown the impact on relationships. This work is much more difficult to do, but even seeing a phone at another table, not even your phone, could degrade the connection that you have with the person you're talking to. Education, students, both in class and after class, lots of data showing the impact of this on education and performance. Same thing in the workplace. So chapters we devote to really breaking this all down. Most of you are probably aware of this just intuitively, but there's tons of data showing the negative impact of interference. So how do we take control of this? How do we turn this story around and do something positive to help us and use technology what it could be used for, which is to better us? Well, I view 2 different pathways. The first is to modify our behavior, and the second is to enhance our brains. You know, hopefully not in the terrifying way that you see here. I just really love that picture. All right, let's talk about modifying our behavior. How do you modify your behavior? The first step is to understand your behavior. Now, I just told you that we have all this interference when we deal with the world because of these limitations in our cognitive control and the high-level goals we set. So why do we do it, right? If we're aware of it, and many of you are already, why do we engage in this way? And this is where I take an evolutionary perspective on this. This is another aspect of our ancient brains. And for that, we could turn to how other animals forage. So I feel that we forage for information. Yes, we're squirrels. That's what you're all thinking right now. It's true. We forage for information in the way that other animals forage for food. The primate brain has co-opted these ancient reward systems that drove animals to eat and forage for survival, drives us to forage for information. And data has shown that. Even non-human primates, monkeys, if you record in the dopamine system in their brain, give them rewards that are food, and then give them rewards that are just pure information, you see similar systems activated. Let's take this a step further. There is a mathematical model known as optimal foraging theory that allows scientists to predict mathematically how animals forage. And there's lots of different types of foraging behavior, predator-prey relationships, but there's one really interesting one known as the marginal value theorem, which tells us how animals forage in patchy environments, like bears with berries or squirrels with nuts. So let's take the squirrel example. So a squirrel is in a tree, and then I'm going to cross over and show you how we forage in a patchy environment like your phone, like your internet browser, is very similar, and that these same principles apply. So I'm not going to go through all the math, but I'm going to give you a nice, rich graph here. I'm going to try to pull this off in one slide. It's literally chapters devoted to this, but when a squirrel, let's say, is foraging, they're trying to have more resources, right? So the cumulative resource intake is on the y-axis. They want more resources. And like everything in life, there's benefits and costs of remaining where they are in a patch. So the benefits of remaining in a patch is the time that they're engaging there is a diminishing return. So picture a squirrel in the tree. As they eat those acorns, there's less and less of them. Less reason for them to be there. It becomes less valuable. And you could see that diminishes until, of course, there's no more nuts. And then they have to leave. But what drives them to stay is not just the value of remaining. It's how long it takes to get to the next source. So if there's a tree right next door, the squirrel is more likely to leave earlier rather than later. And what you could do mathematically is draw a tangent between these and then drop a line at the intersection, and that mathematically predicts the optimal time that an animal will remain in a source before it moves to a new one. That's the marginal value theorem. Hope that made sense. Let's talk about humans, and let's talk about technology. And let's think about how we forage for information in patches, and then try to understand how technology has influenced this. So what I propose is that unlike other animals, we have internal forces that change the value of remaining in a source. And those are boredom and anxiety. And data shows that we are just less tolerant to being bored now. We become anxious. There's something called FOMO. Does everyone know what FOMO is? Fear of missing out. There's other types of anxiety about productivity. And if boredom increases and our anxiety increases, the value of remaining where we are diminishes more rapidly. We have this decrease in value of just remaining there. And then, of course, there's the massive external force of accessibility, right? The fact that this information is right in your pocket, that it's just one tab away, that while you're reading this article, it's just a click to find out about that thing, that next interesting thing on the block, and then that also decreases the time to the next source. All of these forces drive us to rapidly switch. This is why I feel that, and another example of ancient brains in a high-tech world, that technology, through these ancient reward systems to forage for information and how technology has offered it and also changed boredom and anxiety, drives us to constantly switch. The good thing is that once you have a model like this, you can use it to create a pathway to change our behaviors. So for example, if we can decrease accessibility of technology, that should drive the curve out. And if we could decrease boredom and anxiety, that will also move the curve. If we could change these factors, we should remain in sources longer and learn how to single task and have a healthier way of interacting with our technology. So let's talk about that. How can technology do this? And I was really moved yesterday, and it actually resonated all evening long as I was thinking about my conversation with Jon Favreau. And I found this quote, and I even brought it up during our talk, which is what he said, is that I want to find the humanity in the technology. And I feel like that's my message for this year, is that there is so many amazing things that could come from tech if we remember that technology's job is to make humanity better, right? To serve us in a way that really elevates us, not just for tech's sake. So let's step through these behavioral and brain enhancement points once more. So modifying our behavior. Let's just review this. Awareness. You have to be aware of what's going on in order to make a change. Awareness is not enough. We know that exposure to the sun is dangerous. We know that smoking is dangerous. It has not eliminated those behaviors. But the first step is to start recognizing the burden of technology because of these limitations in our cognitive control. And then figuring out ways to modify our accessibility, change our arousal and our boredom and anxiety levels. And lots of things you could do without tech in this regard. You can make decisions about when you restrict accessibility. When you're working on something that's critical and high level, shut down your other tech sources. Focus on it. Set yourself just an hour to do it. And then deal with the boredom issue by not saying I'm going to do it for an entire hour. Say I'm going to do it for 5 minutes, and then I'm going to take a healthy break like meditation or just some mindfulness practice, maybe some exercise, closing your eyes, exposure to nature. Also anxiety, setting limits on when other people can contact you so that they understand that during this period of time, you're really just engaging in one thing. And there are dozens of apps and even new hardware being developed now. I'm not not going to go through all these now. I list them all in the last chapter of the book that can be used to help with this. So technology can be designed from scratch, or even existing technology can be leveraged to help manage all of these things that should allow us our behaviors to change. All right, let's talk about enhancing our brain. So many different amazing opportunities here. First, there are just the pure experiences, like traditional education being the most common one, but these other approaches to driving plasticity in the brain and leading to improvements in how our brains function, and hopefully decrease the distracted mind through that pathway. And then, of course, anything good for our physical body is good for our brains, right? These are all connected systems: exercise, nutrition, stress, and sleep. More data all the time showing the value of these approaches. And then we can't ignore pharmaceuticals, right? They have challenges. We know about that. I usually spend a lot of time talking about it. I'm not going to do that here, but we know about the side effects associated with them. But there's lots of value that could come from them in more modest doses, and lots of roles that technology could play in their delivery. And then, of course, there's the pure tech move. The neurofeedback to capture brain information and help you control your processing. And then implantables. We heard about that a lot yesterday, as well as stimulation through the scalp. Technology could play a role in all these things, and we're really, in my view, at a phase shift moment now. And I'm, preaching to the choir here, but it's worth noticing that consumer level, virtual reality, augmented reality, wearable physiological devices, motion capture, AI, and other machine learning technologies are just rushing into the consumer space. The opportunity is right now, before we have to, in retrospect, say, oh, maybe that wasn't the best idea. Start thinking about these concepts of the limitations of our brain and leveraging this technology for its positive impact. How do we do that? It's because we could use these technologies to create experience, and experiences are the gateway to our brain's plasticity, right? That wondrously complex dance of change that occurs in all of our brains at every level. Its structure, its chemistry, its function is all changing in response to experience, and technology could create powerful experiences. And I would say that the technology that's existing in this room and that's now emerging into the consumer domain can create even more powerful experiences. So our goal is, how do we create new technology or leverage existing ones to build powerful experiences, to harness our brain's plasticity, to help with our distracted mind, to help improve our cognition, refine our behavior, ultimately to elevate our minds, right? To improve things like wisdom and compassion at the highest level. How do we do that? My personal bias is that we create technologies as closed-loop systems. A closed loop is where you intervene in some way and you record the impact. You quantify that as rapidly as possible. You then use that information to refine your intervention. If it was too much, you pull back. If it was too little, you go more. You apply, you record, you refine. You cycle over and over again, optimizing, becoming more personalized and more targeted each pass. This is the most effective way to change something, and this is the only approach that I believe will change something as complex as the human brain, is the closed loop. There's many ways that technology can be used to create closed-loop systems. We use it in the physical domain, in dryer systems and drill bits. But I would say that when it comes to the mind and behavior, one really exciting opportunity is through video games. And here's just a quick cartoon about how we do this. So you're playing a game, and of course your brain is playing the game. It leads to performance metrics, how fast you are, how rapid you are. The game could record all this data in real time and then feed back in a closed loop an environment that's scaled to your ability, so that the challenge is right at that sweet spot, not so hard that it's frustrating, not so easy that it's boring. We can also give feedback in real time, and every game designer knows that this type of real-time feedback about performance drives that deep engagement and immersion, which is critical for having fun in a game, but also going to be critical to drive the plasticity of the system, right? Our brain is plastic, but there's homeostasis that tries to preserve, and so we have to overcome that. And so the game mechanics can target the experience to improve the system, let's say distraction or attention or even task switching. And then the closed loops dynamics puts pressure on it to change it over time. And then we could bring in all the other amazing technology that we're talking about, motion capture and wearable physiological devices to feed even richer data about yourself into the game engine. And then, of course, augmented and virtual reality, we could create more real-world experiences, either completely simulated or overlaid on the real world, that could then drive even further change. And we could wrap this all together with machine learning and other AI algorithms to create a truly integrated, multimodal, closed-loop system. So I believe strongly that this will be the future of optimizing our brain function and will help. It will not solve the distracted mind problem. We will have to change our behavior in the world, but this will go a long way, and I think that we'll see an impact of this across multiple domains. This is the main focus of the work that we do at my center at Neuroscape, and Gazzaley, a company that I helped co-found that's right out here, is taking this technology to the next level. And many other companies here and around the world that I'm very interested in are looking at this across all the domains that we've talked about XTech, right? So not just digital medicine, but also wellness and education and training itself. And I just want to close with the most futuristic view in my mind is that we could capture real-time brain data. This is technology from our group as well in collaboration with many others called the glass brain. You're looking at my glass brain here. This is a combination of an MRI and real-time EEG. So what you're watching essentially just 200 milliseconds after it occurs are different frequencies, rhythms in my brain represented by different colors and a computational model of how different brain areas are communicating while I'm playing a game. We could then take all this data, bring it right into the Unity game engine, and fly through a real brain in real time. And I can tell you, watching your own brain watch itself in real time is quite a surreal experience. I encourage you all to have that someday. And what we could then do is look at new types of diagnostics, real-time recording of the brain to help us understand the brain as it evolves, and also ultimately close the loop. To use brain data to drive our technology so that it can challenge you and give you rewards based on what's actually happening inside your brain, including driving stimulators to also encourage the plasticity process. So this is the focus of a lot of the work that we do right here at UCSF. I want to just give you a link, neuroscape.ucsf.edu. I haven't really talked a lot about our work. I really wanted to give the framework here of the challenges that technology has placed upon us so that we can develop with that information in mind. And I'd like to thank you all for being here this morning. Thank you.